The first time I saw Emily crying in the grocery store parking lot, I almost didn't stop. Rain was coming down in sheets, turning the asphalt into a dark mirror that reflected the flickering neon sign of the 24-hour Safeway. Her Honda Accord's trunk stood open, like a gaping wound bags of groceries scattered across the wet pavement. What made me finally roll down my window wasn't the sight of her ruined Thanksgiving turkey. It was the way she kept smoothing her damp hair behind her ears with shaking hands, that precise gesture of trying to maintain dignity when your world is falling apart. "Need some help?" I asked, and in that moment became part of a story I didn't yet understand. Turned out, Emily wasn't just having a bad day. She was running from something. The way her eyes darted toward the mall entrance every 30 seconds told me that much. Later, over lukewarm coffee at a Denny's booth, she'd confess in fragments between sugar packet origami, the restraining order against her ex-husband that wasn't worth the paper it was printed on, the way he'd started parking outside her yoga studio, the single red rose left on her windshield last Tuesday, with thorns deliberately left on the stem. What stayed with me wasn't the fear, though. It was how she laughed suddenly when recounting how she'd thrown his favorite golf clubs into the community pool at 3 a.m., the chlorinated water ruining the expensive metal. "Best $200 HOA fine I ever paid," she said, and in that laugh, I heard the first notes of a woman rediscovering her own strength. The twist came 2 weeks later, when I spotted Emily's photo in the local paper, not as a victim, but as the founder of a new self-defense workshop for women at the YMCA. Turns out, saving yourself looks good in newsprint. Evan Price slid the Bahrain contract across the conference table with a smirk that made my knuckles whiten around my pen. "We're standardizing all agreements to the Chicago template," he announced, as if reciting gospel. The clause I'd spent weeks carefully crafting, the one respecting local inheritance laws while protecting our assets, had been replaced with cold, impersonal legalese. I opened my mouth to argue, but Evan cut me off with a wave of his hand. "Sentiment doesn't close deals, Rebecca. Efficiency does." The way he said my name, like it was a frivolous accessory, made the back of my neck burn. That night, I sat in my car outside the office, staring at the illuminated Weston & Co. logo. My phone buzzed a message from Khalid Al-Farsi, our Bahraini partner. "The new contract insults my grandfather's name." The words blurred as my eyes welled up. 12 years of trust unraveling because some Ivy League hotshot thought culture was a spreadsheet footnote. Then came the twist I didn't see coming. At 3 a.m., my doorbell rang. Evan stood on my porch, disheveled, his usually perfect hair sticking up in frantic angles. "The Bahrain deal collapsed," he said, voice cracking. "They've pulled out of all pending contracts." His tie was loose, his breath sharp with bourbon. For the first time, he looked human. I should have savored the moment. Instead, I felt sick, because the real disaster wasn't Evan's humiliation. It was the email chain flashing on his phone screen. The Bahraini team had copied every major client in the Gulf on their withdrawal notice, citing cultural disrespect as the reason. Evan's hands shook as he scrolled. "Fix this," he begged. I almost laughed. The man who called my life's work sentiment now needed it like oxygen. Outside dawn bled into the sky. Somewhere in Bahrain, the sun was rising over a boardroom where my name had just become currency. The Rafi deal was supposed to be my swan song, a final flawless negotiation before I walked away from Weston & Co. for good. But Evan, in his infinite corporate wisdom, had other plans. I found out by accident. A misplaced email chain popped up on my screen during my morning coffee. Evan's assistant had CC'd me instead of BCC'd. The subject line made my stomach drop. Rafi Liaison Transition Plan. Per Evan's directive, the memo read, "We're reassigning primary liaison duties to James Whitaker effective immediately. James has been briefed on the voice authentication protocol and will handle all future verifications." I nearly choked on my coffee. James Whitaker, the same James, who at last month's dinner with the Rafi team had proudly declared he'd never needed more than Google Translate to close a deal. The same James who'd laughed when our hosts explained the significance of serving dates with the right hand. The betrayal burned deeper because it was so calculated. Evan hadn't just sidelined me. He'd waited until the final verification, the one that would release the first $800 million tranche to make his move. He wanted the Rafi team to have no choice but to accept James. He wanted to prove culture didn't matter. I should have let it happen. Let Evan crash his own plane. But 12 years of instinct kicked in. I called Khalid Al-Farsi from a payphone outside Grand Central, speaking in the clipped Arabic dialect we reserved for emergencies. "Tell Rafi's chairman," I said, voice steady, "that if anyone other than me attempts the voice authentication tomorrow, the system will lock permanently." It was a lie, but Khalid didn't need to know that. The next morning, Evan strutted into the boardroom with James in tow, already rehearsing his victory speech to shareholders. The video link to Bahrain flickered to life. Rafi's chairman, usually warm, wore an expression as unreadable as stone. "Authentication required," the system prompted in Arabic. James leaned forward confidently and froze. The prompt wasn't the standard phrase. It was a proverb, one so regionally specific even I had to pause. "The palm tree bends in the wind, but its roots know the sand." Silence stretched. Evan's smile slipped. Then from the speakers, Rafi's chairman spoke for the first time. "Ms. Leora," he said in perfect English, "would you do us the honor?" I didn't look at Evan as I answered, but I heard his pen snap when the system chimed. Verified. Some roots, it seemed, ran too deep to cut. The room held its breath as Fatima fumbled through the final lines of my speech. Evan's knuckles whitened around his pen. I could see the exact moment he realized his mistake, when Rafi's chairman leaned back in his chair. Fingers steepled his expression, the calm before a storm. Then came the twist no one expected. The chairman reached into his briefcase and withdrew an identical inlaid wooden box. The gasp in the room was audible. "A curious coincidence," he said, in slow, deliberate English. "This was meant for you, Ms. Leora." He opened the lid to reveal not dates, but a single key, the kind that unlocked private vaults in Bahraini banks. A token from my personal collection, for the woman who speaks our language better than some of my own executives. Evan's face drained of color. The unspoken message was clear. They'd known. They'd always known who truly understood this deal. I didn't move, didn't smile, just watched as the chairman slid the contract toward Evan with one finger. "There is, however, a problem." He tapped the continuity clause, my clause now highlighted in angry yellow. "According to this, the agreement is void if the liaison changes." And yet, his gaze flicked to Fatima, then back to Evan. "Here we are." Evan opened his mouth, but the chairman cut him off. "We will sign, but only if Ms. Leora reads her original speech and remains lead liaison through final disbursement." He paused. "Unless, of course, Weston prefers to explain to shareholders why they lost $2.5 billion over what was it you called it? A cultural quirk." The silence that followed was so thick, I could hear Fatima's nervous swallow. Evan's jaw worked like he was chewing glass. I stood slowly smoothing my jacket. For 12 years, I'd been the invisible hand holding this company together. Now, every eye in the room watched as I took my place at the head of the table. The chairman smiled and pushed the wooden box toward me. "Begin whenever you're ready," he said in Arabic. And for the first time in my career, I didn't translate for Evan. Let him sit there in the dark. Some lessons needed to be felt, not explained. The encrypted message glowed on my phone like a live wire. Protocol 9 engaged. I should have felt vindicated. Evan's arrogance had finally cost him everything. But the hollow ache in my chest wasn't triumph. It was grief for the bridges I'd built, now burning behind me. Then my doorbell rang. I expected a courier with termination papers. Instead, I opened the door to find Khalid Al-Farsi holding 2 cups of cardamom coffee steam curling into the night air. "You left this in the boardroom," he said, extending a leather folio, my personal notebook, the one with handwritten margin notes in Arabic and English. I stared at it. That notebook contained 12 years of unspoken truths, which ministers preferred indirect flattery, which clauses would trigger automatic rejection, which families controlled, which ports. It was worth more than Weston's entire legal department. Khalid didn't step inside, didn't ask to be invited, just said quietly, "Rafi's chairman would like to discuss a consulting position. Starting tomorrow." He placed 1 coffee cup on my entryway table. "He said to tell you the sand remembers the shape of the palm tree's roots." The proverb hung between us heavier than any contract. They weren't just offering a job. They were offering witness. As Khalid turned to leave, my phone buzzed again. A second encrypted alert: Weston & Co. shares suspended from trading pending emergency board meeting. I almost didn't recognize the sound of my own laughter, sharp and bright as shattered glass. Somewhere across town, Evan was finally learning the cost of efficiency. And for the first time in 12 years, I wasn't there to clean up the mess. I closed the door, picked up the coffee, and opened my notebook to a fresh page. The ink flowed smoothly, unfurling like a banner in the empty space where loyalty used to live. Let them call it revenge. I knew its true name: accountability. The coffee had gone cold in my hands when the second clip surfaced, this one far more damning. A grainy video from the hallway camera outside the boardroom, time-stamped moments after my firing. Evan's voice carried crystal clear. "Finally got rid of the cultural baggage. Now we can run this like a real company." The internet did what the internet does. By noon, cultural baggage was trending. By 12:30 p.m., Weston's PR team issued a tepid statement about misunderstandings in translation. At 12:47 p.m., the clip reached Sheikh Al-Mansour's personal Twitter account. His response consisted of 3 words: "We remember, we choose." Attached was a photo of the unopened gift box sitting on a conference table next to a signed memorandum of understanding with a new firm, my firm. The phone started ringing then. First journalists, then headhunters. Then around 2:15 p.m., a call from a number I hadn't seen in years. Weston's CEO. I let it go to voicemail. The message played through my speaker system as I stood at my balcony window, watching traders sprint across Wall Street below. "Leora, we need to talk about..." A pause. A sigh. "Christ, you set this whole thing up from the start, didn't you?" I smiled for the first time in days. Not because of the crumbling stock price or Evan's inevitable resignation, but because of what came next on the voicemail, the raw, desperate sound of a man finally understanding the cost of ignoring the invisible threads that hold the world together. "Name your price," the CEO said. I deleted the message. Outside, the market bell rang. Somewhere in Bahrain, a vault key turned in a lock. And in my quiet apartment, I opened my laptop to a new email from Rafi's chairman. When can you start? The game hadn't changed. Just the players. The call came at 5:17 p.m., just as the last golden light of the day slid across my desk. Evan's voice was stripped of its usual arrogance, replaced by something raw and unfamiliar, desperation laced with humiliation. Leora. He said my name like it was a pill stuck in his throat. We need to fix this. I let the silence stretch, watching the reflection of clouds move across my darkened computer screen. When I finally spoke, my voice was calm, measured the same tone I'd used for years, to explain cultural nuances to men like him. There's nothing to fix, Evan. Only consequences to accept. A sharp inhale on his end. Then the sound I'd been waiting for, the quiet crack in his carefully constructed facade. What do you want? A public apology, reinstatement, name it. I almost pitied him then, still thinking in transactions, still believing every relationship had a price. I already have what I want, I said softly. Watching you learn what should have been obvious from the start, trust isn't a clause in a contract. It's the contract itself. The line went dead before he could reply. Outside, the city lights flickered on one by one. My phone buzzed another message, from Rafi's chairman this time, with a photo attached. The wooden gift box finally opened its golden threaded dates, arranged carefully, on a silver tray between two tiny cups of cardamom coffee. The caption read, "We saved your seat at the table." I didn't reply immediately. Instead, I walked to the window, pressing my palm against the cool glass. Somewhere, in the chaos of Midtown, Evan was drowning in the mess he'd made. And for the first time in 12 years, I wasn't there to throw him a lifeline. The realization tasted sweeter than the dates waiting for me halfway across the world. The chairman's grip was firm, his eyes holding mine with the weight of unspoken history. As I signed the contract, the pen glided effortlessly across the paper, no hesitation, no second guessing. The ink might as well have been 12 years of untold stories finally finding their rightful place. They served coffee, then the rich cardamom-infused brew I'd come to love during those long nights, negotiating deadlines across time zones. But this time, there was no urgency, no glancing at the clock. The chairman lifted his cup in a silent toast. "To new beginnings," he said in Arabic. "To trust earned," I replied. The meeting shifted, then the atmosphere lighter as we discussed upcoming projects. But just as we stood to leave, the chairman paused at the door. "One more thing," he said, signaling to his assistant. A familiar wooden box was placed in my hands, the same one Fatima had fumbled with at Weston. Inside, nestled beside the gold-wrapped dates, was a single key. Not to a bank vault this time, but to a corner office in their New York headquarters. "We had this prepared weeks ago," the chairman admitted with a smile. "Call it intuition." I ran my fingers over the intricate carvings, the same patterns I'd admired in Riyadh's souks. Somewhere across town, Weston's board was still scrambling to contain the fallout. But here, in this quiet moment, the world felt perfectly balanced. As I stepped out into the Manhattan sunlight, my phone buzzed another message from Evan. I didn't read it. The game had changed. And for the first time in my career, I was playing by my own rules. The key turned smoothly in my pocket with every step. Not just a symbol of a new position, but a reminder true power isn't taken. It's offered by those who recognize its worth. The chairman joined me at the window, handing me a small porcelain cup of Arabic coffee, unfiltered, potent, the way I'd always preferred it. "To your first day as our North American gatekeeper," he said, clinking his cup against mine. The bitterness of the coffee, mixed with the sweetness of cardamom, a perfect balance, just like this moment. As I took my first sip, my assistant, not Weston's, entered with an update. The New York Times had just published an exposé on Weston's collapse with one particularly damning quote from an anonymous board member. "We didn't realize our most valuable asset walked out the door until $5 billion followed her." The chairman chuckled, swirling his coffee. "Shall we send them a fruit basket?" I smiled, but didn't answer. The truth was, I'd already moved beyond them. My gaze drifted to the wall-mounted screen, displaying live market data, Weston's stock ticker, still bleeding red, while Rafi's glowed a steady green. That evening, as I prepared to leave, the chairman stopped me at the elevator. "One last thing," he said, handing me a slim folder. Inside was a deed to a penthouse apartment in Manhattan's financial district. "Consider it a signing bonus. You'll need somewhere to host our American partners." The elevator doors opened, but before I stepped in, I turned back. "Why all this?" I asked, gesturing to the office, the view, the deed in my hands. The chairman's smile faded into something more profound. "Because you never asked for it," he said simply. "At Weston, you fought for scraps. Here, we give you the feast without you having to beg." The doors closed on his final words. That's what real trust looks like. As the elevator descended, I leaned against the mirrored wall, watching the floors tick by. Somewhere, 40 stories above, a new nameplate was being mounted on a door. My name. No titles, no corporate branding. Just 3 simple words in Arabic and English. Leora Nash Bridge Builder. The elevator chimed. The doors opened, and I stepped out not into someone else's shadow, but into a future I'd earned with every careful word, every late night, every moment I'd chosen integrity over ambition. Outside, the city lights twinkled like stars finally aligned. Somewhere across town, Evan was probably staring at a spreadsheet, trying to quantify his failure. But me, I was already free. The desert wind carried the scent of saffron and hot sand as I slid into the waiting car. Through the tinted window, I watched Rafi Holdings Tower shrink in the distance, its glass surface now reflecting the fiery hues of sunset instead of the harsh midday sun. My phone buzzed with a notification the penthouse deed had been officially recorded. No contingencies, no corporate clawbacks, just mine. As the driver merged onto the highway, I caught my reflection in the window. Same face, same sharp cheekbones, but with eyes that no longer held that quiet tension of waiting to be recognized. The weightlessness surprised me. After years of fighting invisible battles in boardrooms, I'd forgotten what it felt like to move through the world unburdened. The car passed a billboard for Weston & Co., their new Global Vision campaign, featuring a smiling, diverse team. I almost didn't recognize Evan in the corner, cropped out of the central image, his face partially obscured by a slogan about innovation. The irony tasted sweeter than the date still sitting in my briefcase. We crossed the city limits as the first stars appeared. Somewhere over the Atlantic, a plane carried my old security badge and unused business cards to the bottom of some landfill. Ahead lay Manhattan, my new apartment, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing the best endings aren't about burning bridges, but about building better ones on your own terms. The driver turned up the radio, an old jazz standard about second chances, I leaned back and let the music fill the space where resentment used to live. The road stretched before us, smooth and open, leading toward a horizon that was finally mine to define. End scene. Note: final paragraph maintains YouTube storytelling conventions while avoiding platform-specific calls to action to keep the narrative immersive.